Hi, you guys. So I hope my phone doesn't die. So I'm gonna get one more chapter in, and then I'm also trying to dodge the sun because I know it probably keeps blinding you. Or maybe you're like, please let it blind me so I don't have to see your face. I get that too. All right. So Two Brothers of the South. Remember a few chapters ago, I told you we were going to meet T-Bob and something else. So Timmy is the other one. Okay, this one gets confusing. So they're half brothers. Okay, so one of the boys is black and one of the boys is white. And so you got to kind of keep that together, okay? Can we guess who the daddy is? Mr. Sampson? Yes. So even after slavery, some things don't always change. Okay. You ready? We're on page 145, and the PDF should show the page numbers as well. Okay, Two Brothers of the South. Timmy and T-Bob was brothers, half brothers. Timmy wasn't. T-Bob was white. Everybody on the plantation, everybody on the river, everybody in that house, including T-Bob and Miss Amadine, knowed Timmy was Robert Sampson's boy. And Robert never tried to hide it, and couldn't even if he wanted to, because Timmy was more like him than poor T-Bob ever would be. When he was nothing but a child, Timmy liked to ride and hunt just like Robert always did. Had all of Robert's mischief ways. You say on your guard round either one of them. Robert didn't care what he did to white or black. Timmy didn't care what he did to men or women, long as they was black. Built just like Robert, tall and skinny. But Robert was white, red, and Timmy was brown. Robert had brown hair and gray eyes. Timmy had reddish brown hair and brown eyes. Nose hooked just alike. Now, T-Bob was small and delicate all his life. The only reason they'd give him the name Little Robert, the doctor told Miss Amadine she couldn't have any more children. But any other name would have fit T-Bob better. When T-Bob got big enough to ride, Robert came in the quarters and told Verda he wanted Timmy to ride with him. Called Verda to the gate, like coming to that house was something new to him. Like he hadn't tied that horse at that gate 100 times and walked in that house and stayed there till he himself got ready to leave. I don't want him up there, Verda told him. He'll be treated right, Robert said. I don't want him waiting on nobody's table, Verda said. He'll just ride with T-Bob, Robert said. T-Bob's butler? Verda said. His brother's butler? So now we know Verda is Timmy's mom, okay? Just in case you didn't figure that one out. Here's where you can kind of get a chance to start working on your own genealogy. You can practice here, right? Do Sampson, Robert Sampson, and then Amadine is his wife, and Verda is his, mistress, girlfriend. Timmy is Verda's son and Robert's son. And then under Amadine will be T-Bob. Okay, so that'll kind of help you to remember who's who. Now I gotta find where I am. I expect him up there tomorrow, Robert said. Not if you're going to wait on table, Verda said. Tomorrow, Robert said, and rode away. Timmy came up to the front to work. He was about 12 then, because he was 6 or 7 years older than T-Bob. When T-Bob was at school, Timmy looked after the horses. When T-Bob came home, Timmy saddled up the horses, and they rode out in the field together. T-Bob on his little Shetland pony, Johnny. Timmy on that half-broke thing called Hurricane. Soon as they hit the field, T-Bob would come over where I was. No matter what I was doing, picking cotton, cutting cane, here he would come. If my sack was full, he would take it to the end for me. If we was cutting cane and it was cold, he would tell me go stand by the fire. He took a liking to me soon as I came here. So when Aunt Hattie died, Uncle Buddy wasn't far behind. I was the one he told the people at the house to bring up there. I didn't want to go up there. I loved the outside too much. Then, even cold, I didn't mind. Then, I looked at cold and heat like everything else. But them at the house thought I was slowing up in the field and I could do better at the front. Paul Sampson was the one who come out there and asked me what I knowed about cooking. We was cutting cane, December, almost freezing out there. I said I'd been doing it over 60 years. I hadn't answered soon enough for him, and now he just sat there on the horse looking down at me. He said he meant cooking for white people. I said I ain't poisoned none yet. He sat on the horse looking down at me a while, and then he said, "Be at the house 6 o'clock tomorrow. Show me if you can make biscuits smart as you can talk." I said, "I like it right here where I am, if you don't mind." He sat there looking down at me a while, and then he said, "You do?" Real cold that day. Joe Ambrose way down the road, just cutting and singing. Paul Sampson said, "Maybe you ain't heard it yet. On Sampson, you like what Paul Sampson like, or maybe you've heard it and you just don't mind borrowing that wagon again." Well, which is it? So you know what he's saying here? He's saying that when you're on my property, you like what I like. And if you don't like it, you can borrow that wagon and you can hightail it out of here. That's what he's saying to her. That's how I got up there. But after I was up there a while, I didn't mind it at all. I had other people to help me do the work. And I had all the free time I wanted to fish and work in my garden. Sometimes I would get Timmy to get Rags out of the pasture for me, and I would ride out in the field. One day I was crazy enough to ride out there with Timmy and T-Bob. I should have known Timmy was some rascality up his sleeves when I first got on that horse. Everything felt too good to be true. The saddle was just right. He had drawn up the stirrups so my feet could fit in them. He had put on a good bridle, good strong reins, the girt tied well, everything just right. I'm thinking, something he want me to do for him? He ain't doing all this for nothing. All the way back in the field, I'm trying to figure out what Timmy wants. Probably money, I think. Then I try to figure what he wants the money for. I don't ask him. I just look at him out in the corner of my eyes. Looking at Timmy, you're looking at nobody but Robert Sampson himself. Them shoulders up, them elbows in, riding there just like Robert. That straw hat cocked a little over his eyes, just like Robert, for the world. But them eyes wasn't saying a thing, just looking straight ahead like nothing going on. I looked down at T-Bob. He ain't saying nothing either. But him and Timmy had worked this out well together. When we got in the field, we went over there, over where Grace and the rest of the people was cutting cane. Grace looked at me and said, "Well, if it ain't the high class." "Just my little evening stroll," I said. "That's when you the high class," Gracie said. "Me? I got to work for a living." I followed Grace down the cane field, just talking. All the time, T-Bob and Timmy wasn't far away. Then after I'd been out there a while, I began to feel chilly. I told Grace I thought I'd be heading back to the front. Soon as I said that, T-Bob went over a few rows and shot out for the headland. Little Johnny was running so fast, his mouth almost touching the ground. "What's the matter with him?" I said. "Gone crazy all of a sudden." Then Grace hollered, "Jane, hold on." But Timmy had already hit Rags with the stalk of cane, and the horse almost shot out from under me. Now it was nobody but me, Rags, and that cane field. I was holding pump, mane, and bridle. All over the field, people was hollering at me, "Hold him, Miss Jane! Hold him! Hold him, Miss Jane! Hold him!" Rags hit the headland and leaned way to the right, like he might tip over. But he held to his feet. A few more strides, he hit the back road and leaned way to the left. But he kept to his feet again. Now, it wasn't nobody but me, Rags, and that back road. because I'd passed T-Bob way back there, and there wasn't nothing ahead of me now, and nothing likely to catch me till Rags got to that front gate and stopped. Of course, Timmy could have caught me on Hurricane. That time, Hurricane could beat any horse in the parish running, probably any horse in the state running. But Timmy never could leave T-Bob behind him. No matter what happened, T-Bob rode ahead of him, if just by a nose, but not ever behind him. So I had nothing to stop Rags now but that gate at the front. Of course, I wanted to fall off, but fall where? It was grinding, and that ground was hard as a rock. And I was in my 60s, and if I'd hit that ground traveling 100 miles an hour, I would have busted open like a watermelon. So, I didn't fall. I held on tight. Aunt Gilly and Aunt Sarah was sitting out on the gallery, and Aunt Sarah heard the horse running off. She said she'd know the horse was running off because the horse makes a different sound than he makes when he's just running for the fun of it. His hooves make a louder sound, and they don't keep rhythm like they do when the horse is just racing. She said she had to holler at Aunt Gilly 3 or 4 times before she could make him hear her. "Horse running off," she said loud. "Horse, Jane, Gilly! Horse, Jane!" She said she knowed it was me because Timmy could handle Hurricane with ease, and T-Bob's horse, Johnny, couldn't make that kind of noise. "Horse, Jane!" she said loud. "Gilly! Gilly!" When he caught on to what she was trying to tell him, he came out on the road with his walking stick. From way down the quarters, I could see him waving the stick up and down. Not right and left like he should have been waving it, but up and down. The closer I got, the faster Uncle Gilly waved the stick. Now he was waving it with both hands and backing up at the same time. Waving and backing up, waving and backing up. Then I didn't see him. When and how Rags went by Aunt Gilly or over Aunt Gilly, I don't know. I know 1 second I was seeing him waving that stick. The next second, I was passing the church house. When Rags came up to the big gate, he stopped so quick I almost went over his head. Miss Amadine was already there with the spy glasses. So spy glasses are like binoculars. She had watched the whole thing from the back gallery. In grinding, when most of the cane was down, you could see a couple miles back in the field. She said she had seen Rags turn off the headland onto the back road, and she had seen him coming straight for the big house, straight toward her like a train on a railroad track. She said she could see T-Bob too on Johnny, his little elbows sticking way out, kicking Johnny to make him go faster, like if kicking a horse the size of Johnny could ever make him catch a whirlwind. She could see Timmy too, riding a little behind T-Bob, both of them laughing. No, she couldn't see their mouths with the spy glasses, just like she couldn't see my eyes with the spy glasses. But she could see how tight I was holding on, and she could guess how scared I was. And seeing how loose and free Timmy and T-Bob was riding, she could tell they was laughing even when she couldn't see it. By the time Rags got to the gate, she had closed up the spy glasses and run across the yard. "It was Timmy," she said. "I don't know," I said. "It might have been a was." Rags was breathing hard. I was breathing hard. Both of us sweating. Almost freezing now, but both of us sweating. "Was?" Miss Amadine said, and looked at me a long time. She knowed it was Timmy because Timmy was Robert's son, and Robert would have done the same thing. No, not woulda, did it. To one of her cousins. Had put one of her own cousins on a half-broke horse, and the horse had thrown him across the fence. Timmy and T-Bob came up there still laughing. Little Johnny was so tired his mouth hung about an inch off the ground. Don't forget little Johnny's a horse. "Was," Miss Amadine said, still looking at me with the spy glasses in her hand. Then she looked at Timmy. At first she was mad enough to hit him with the spy glasses, but the longer she looked at him, the more she saw Robert. Robert would have done the same thing. No, he had done it. But Timmy wasn't Robert, even if it was Robert's son. He had to remember he was still a... Robert, you know better, she told T-Bob. Jane can ride, T-Bob said. Best I ever seen, Timmy said. Shut up, Miss Amandine said. Nobody told you to open your mouth. She waited for him to say something else. He was Robert's son, and Robert definitely would have answered back. Mr. Robert will hear about this, she said. He was looking across the yard at the big house. From the way he was sitting in the saddle, not slumped over like an ought to be, but with them shoulders up and that straw hat cocked a little over his eyes, he was telling us Robert wasn't going to do him a thing. But he didn't have to tell it to me. I knowed all the time Robert wouldn't do nothing. But Miss Amandine still didn't know, had been married to Robert 10, 12 years, and still didn't know what he'd do. Take that hat off, Timmy, she said. He took it off, but he still didn't look at her. Well, she said. Yes, ma'am, he said, hardly loud enough for me to hear him, and I was up there on the horse. When Robert came in that evening, Miss Amandine told him what had happened. Robert started laughing. He wished he had been there. He didn't know Rags still had that spunk. Did my eyes get big and white? Did they go up and down in my head? Could Miss Amandine hear my teeth hitting together through the spyglasses? He wasn't ever at home when all the good things happened. And Timmy, Miss Amandine said. Well, Jane's not hurt, Robert said. She could have been. Well, she's not. Well, he can take his hat off, Miss Amandine said. I'll talk to him, Robert said. But I wish I'd seen it. When you going for another ride, Jane? Not with them ever, I said. That's too bad, he said. He didn't say a word to Timmy. He knowed Timmy respected Miss Amandine. He knowed Timmy had to respect Miss Amandine just like he had to respect every white lady or white man. The other thing didn't matter. Not long after that happened, Timmy had his run-in with Tom Joe and had to leave home. Timmy and T-Bob was riding in the field when the horse throwed T-Bob and broke his arm. Tom Joe was walking across the yard when Timmy brought T-Bob home. He carried T-Bob in the house himself. Then he came back outside and asked Timmy what had happened. Timmy told him. He knocked Timmy down. He hated Timmy with all his might. Timmy got away with too much from that house up there. He knew that Timmy was Robert Sampson's boy, and he hated that Sampson in Timmy, much as he hated in him. More because it was Sampson blood in Timmy that made him so uppity. No, he didn't hit Timmy for what had happened to T-Bob. He hated T-Bob much as he hated the rest of the Sampsons. He knocked Timmy down because he knew no white man in his right mind would have said he had done the wrong thing. Albert Walker and Cleon Simon was picking moss in the yard, and they stopped to see what was happening. They said when Timmy got up, he said, "That's enough, Tom Joe." Tom said, "Call me Mister." Timmy said, "I wouldn't call white trash Mister if I was dying." Tom swung at him again, and Timmy moved back. Tom swung again, and Timmy moved back. And now he was grinning at Tom Joe because Tom Joe couldn't hit him. Tom ran on him to throw him down, but Timmy brushed him to the side. And Tom Joe was the one who fell. When he got up, he grabbed the pole out of Albert's hand. He didn't have to grab it. Albert was so scared of Tom Joe, he practically handed him the pole. The people used to get moss out of the trees with these long poles they used for thrush and pecan trees. You could stick the pole in a pile of moss up in the tree, then wind it round good and pull it down. Tom Joe grabbed the pole out of Albert's hand and struck Timmy with it. Instead of Albert and Cleon trying to help Timmy, Cleon started hollering for Miss Amandine to come out there and stop Tom Joe. Miss Amandine left me in there to look after T-Bob, and she ran out in the yard. I could hear her screaming at Tom Joe the moment she came out on the back gallery. She would have run him off the place. She would have had him put in jail, put in the pen even. But her screaming at Tom Joe, threatening Tom Joe, meant no more than threatening a fence post. That hatred for Timmy was too deep in him to stop now. And what white man would put him in jail or keep him in jail after what Timmy had let happen to T-Bob? By the time Miss Amadine got out in the yard, Timmy was bloody and unconscious. Tom Joe threw the pole to the side and walked away. Miss Amadine had Albert to bring Timmy inside. And when the doctor came there to see after T-Bob, he had to look after both of them. Robert came home later that night, and Miss Amadine told him what had happened. Tom Joe ought to be run off the place. No, put in jail. Robert told her he wasn't going to do either. You pinned medals on a white man when he beat it for drawing back his hand. Even a half, Miss Amadine said. There ain't no such thing as a half, Robert said. A few days later, Robert called Timmy to the house to give him some money and send him away. Timmy wanted to see T-Bob before he left. Robert said T-Bob was asleep. Timmy asked could he come back when he woke up. Robert told him no. When T-Bob was able to ride again, they got Claudie Ferdinand to ride with him. But it wasn't the same. T-Bob wanted Timmy. Timmy was his brother, and he wanted his brother there with him. He used to come back there in the kitchen every day and talk about Timmy. He could understand why Timmy had to saddle his horse. He could understand why Timmy had to ride behind him. But he couldn't understand why Timmy had to leave home after a white man had beat him with a stick. I told him Timmy had to leave for his own safety. But he didn't understand what I was saying. I told Miss Amadine to try to explain it to him. Then his uncle Clarence tried. After Clarence, his parrain, Jules Reynard, in Bayonne, tried to explain it to him. All of us tried, except Robert. Robert thought he didn't have to tell T-Bob about these things. They was part of life, like the sun and the rain was part of life, and T-Bob would learn them for himself when he got older. But T-Bob never did. He killed himself before he learned how he was supposed to live in this world. So sad. We're going to get to the chapter where T-Bob does die. But, you know, Jane is really good at preparing us for something. And so let's talk about this a little. Again, there are these unwritten rules in the Deep South that had to be followed. They're all living on the same plantation. And so there are rules that have to be followed. And that's what she's talking about, that, you know, Robert learned these rules from his father, and Robert's going to teach his son the same rules, but it isn't up for explanation. It's just the way it is. And T-Bob is different, you know, maybe in some ways, maybe a little like Ned. He maybe doesn't believe in these ways of the South, right? And so he struggles with it. And Timmy is his brother, and he makes good points about that. To T-Bob, he doesn't see a color line, does he? He just loves Timmy because Timmy's his brother. It doesn't matter that his brother is half black. The phrase that Robert Sampson says, you know, there's no such thing as half black. It's sort of one of those unwritten rules. If you have even a trace of black blood, then you're black. And so this is where, you know, we get into learning more about the color line, and there's stories about people who were born in black families, but they're such light skinned, like maybe even as light as me, that they could pass for being white. And so those are black people. They're still black, but they're able to slip into white society. If you watch Cold Case, there's an episode in Cold Case that I think there's 2 episodes where the guy is white, but there's another episode where the woman is white, but she is also black. So there's a couple stories about that. There's a book called The Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man. You might be able to find it in our library. I can't remember who wrote it, but he was able to pass the color line. And there's a lot of resentment on the Black side when somebody's light enough that they can pass for being white. But then there's also, along with the resentment, there's also that, at least one of us can make it out. And so those are things you can think about too, right? So in this chapter, we find out that T-Bob is going to die, right? He's never going to live long enough. What's your impression of Robert? Like, how he treats Timmy? What do you think of that? Right off the top of my head, I can tell you that Frederick Douglass was a slave, and then he escapes. Right, he escapes to the north. He comes to Boston. He settles down in Lynn. He helps get the 54th All-Black Regiment going for the Civil War. He's a great orator. That means he's a speaker. He's a fabulous speaker. But Frederick Douglass has a fabulous slave story. It's a slave narrative. So you could look up that and read about it. And his story is fantastic. He's one of my favorites. And anyway, his father was his master. And so, there are plenty of these stories around. So rather than getting rid of Tom Joe, right, the overseer, again, they send Timmy away instead. And that's going to be heartbreaking for T-Bob and for other people. And so you can journal about that. Is it a social injustice? You tell me. Our next chapter is of Men and Rivers. I need to go charge my phone, so I'll do that one tomorrow. Okay, go journal.